This is Pastor M.D. Lewis, the speaker for the Bible Interpreter Tapes, and we're dealing with the prophecies of Revelation. The title of our study is The World Bank Goes Broke. I call your attention to Revelation, the 16th chapter, and the 13th chapter, verse 16. And it reads, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." Now this, as we have somewhat commented on previously, is indicative that the financial system of the world has come into some distinctive and definite control. So to enlarge upon this, I turn to the Revelation 18th chapter and read again verse 3. "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication," which is the woman, which represents the world church, "and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." So it is obvious that the financial giants of the world that have come into a great financial system of a world bank, which you understand was formulated and brought into existence at the end of the Second World War. They met in San Francisco, and the great financiers of the world established, which they proposition that they have been working on, to establish a world bank. At that time, I read certain factors of the charter of that World Bank, and one of the statements was that they said, this bank will be in a position to cooperate with any other world or organization for the maintenance of peace. So the formulators of the bank obviously had in mind how the finances could serve in the society of the world. So here it says that these merchants, now you recall that in the last chapter of this book, it says the next to the last chapter, the last verse, that is chapter 18 of Revelation, verse 21 or 23, "And the light of the candle shall no more shine in thee," that is in Babylon, "for thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all the nations deceived." So obviously the financial giants of the earth, which have come together in this World Bank, which are cooperating with this world church to put the financial factor to the decree that none shall be able to buy or sell, these merchants have been made rich by serving the church in making this decree to force upon the enemies of the church who do not keep her day of rest. So you see the merchants got their payoff. It says they waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So the financial concerns of the world made a great profit in collaboration with this world system. So not only did the world church exploit the people and the world state take advantage of in their political power over the people, the World Bank reduced them to slavery. So you can see how that Satan and the last world system may have confidence in their great system, for never in the history of the world have such powerful influences in society come into one organization. The church, the state, and the bank have all come into a world system, and as a consequence, it is going to use their power to bring into subjection those who oppose the church and who are loyal to God's cause. I want to call your attention to a text in the book of Ecclesiastes, the 7th chapter, verse 12. Notice the observation of the preacher, the one who is stated as the wisest man on earth, in the 7th chapter of Ecclesiastes and verse 12. "For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom gives life to them that have it." Now that's a nice text. Money is a defense, wisdom is a defense. But the excellency of wisdom over money is that it will give life unto them that have it. Now, this is certainly pertinent to this subject in the last days, for these powers are going to come into world dominance and control the economy and the economics of the entire world. In the book of Daniel, the 11th chapter, this same factor is alluded to. Now, we haven't made much reference in these studies to the book of the last chapters of Daniel, but it is obvious in the last of the 11th chapter that these verses pertain to the book of Revelation, the 17th chapter, and the events that are there spoken of. And the Sister White makes the same observation. Now, I call your attention to this power. It says here, at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at the king of the north, and I don't want to go into that particular affair, but it has reference to the last days. And in the 43rd verse of the 11th chapter of Daniel, it says, and he, that is, this king of the north, shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, and therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy. Now here you see it is this power of the north, which is the great papal system, because they have set their throne where God's throne is in the north, and they are endeavoring to conquer the whole world. So when they have control of the treasures of gold, but tidings out of the east, which is the loud cry, for the Bible always speaks of the light of salvation in concurrence and with the rising of the sun. So it comes from the east. So the loud cry, when the saints shall make the final proclamation of righteousness, which will be the last proclamation of the truth before probation closes, this great message of righteousness by the persons who themselves are righteous will certainly stir up the animosity of this great world power of apostasy, as we have already observed. And it says, and he, that is the king of the north, shall go forth with great fury to destroy, which, of course, are these Sunday laws and the decree to kill the saints because they will not observe the first day of the week. And he shall plant his tabernacle between the seas. Now, the seas represent people, as which we have said in Revelation 17:15, and the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, which are represented by water. So he puts his throne between the seas, particularly between the seas of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And it says, and he shall plant his tabernacle between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, which may very likely refer to Palestine, the geographical Palestine in the east. But he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. We've already described that, where the swords with which to kill God's people will be picked up by the 10 horns, the people of the earth, and turn upon this great power and destroy it. And there will be none to help him. So you can see how these verses also come into the situation of the last day events. The gold will be under the control of this world power. Now, to bring about this point in a more pertinent manner, let me turn to the book of 1 Timothy and read the observation of the Apostle Paul as described in 1 Timothy, the 6th chapter and verse 10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which some have coveted after. They have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Now you recall that this term, pierced themselves through with sorrows, is the same terminology that the prophet Simeon spoke to Mary when the child Jesus was brought to the temple to be dedicated. And you remember Simeon said to her that this son shall be for the rise and fall of many, and a sword shall pierce through thy person and cause you sorrow. So here again you see these people, because they have loved the money above everything in the world, even above God, and it is the root of evil, and they have coveted after it, and their covetousness have led them to use the money and to dominate the great masses, that finally it turns upon them and pierces them through with many sorrows. How this comes about is described in Proverbs, the 11th chapter, verse 28, You'll notice how the prophets are very, very accurate in describing society and how it functions, particularly those in the last days. I'm reading Proverbs, the 11th chapter, verse 28. He that trusteth in his riches shall fall, but the righteous shall flourish as a branch. Now here again you see the word fall, as Babylon in the second angel's message shall fall. Here the word fall, as I said there, has the symbolic meaning of going down to destruction. He that trusteth in riches shall fall. Now notice in verse 24 of the same chapter, it says, there is that scattereth and yet increases. Now that has reference to the great principle of the saints, that which they give they shall receive, and that which they hold they shall lose. So that which they give to others in the great principles of love, they will retain. So that's what it refers to here. There is that scattereth and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. Now it is very, very obvious in the book of James that these rich people have withheld more than was meet. Now let me read that text again. There is that withholdeth more than is meet, that is, more than is legally required or honestly required. They have withheld more, and it tendeth to poverty. So we bring your attention to this text in the book of James, the 5th chapter, verse 1 and following. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl, for your misery shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your riches are corrupted. Your gold and silver. Now you see these are the same terms used in Daniel the 11th chapter. They shall gain control over the gold and silver. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you. Now the word for rust in this particular text in Greece means to eat away. Now you know that's exactly what rust does. The oxidation eats away the metal. So here he uses the word rust to mean it eats away. Their gold and silver, so to speak, eats away their soul, because they have withheld more than was legally and justly proper. For it goes on to say that the rest of them shall witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Now I call your attention to the statements that I referred to before in dealing with this buy and sell, that you recall that Sister White observes, which is absolutely taking place in the world today. There are coalitions and accumulation and amalgamation of great companies coming together with great wealth, whereby that 90% of the wealth of the United States are held in control by less than 2 or 3% of the populace. So the more we see the combining of wealth in banking and in industry, we will recognize that this is a fulfillment of this particular prophecy. Not only will the churches come together, not only will the political states come together, the banking and the great financial concerns of the world and industry will come together. And the reason for it is that they are uniting their forces for strength to be used by Satan to bring pressure upon God's people, to force them into subjection to the false Sabbath. So it says here that, behold, this is the 4th verse of this same chapter of James, the 5th chapter, this is verse 4, behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. That word Sabaoth means the Lord of hosts. Now, you notice in this verse, it is exactly what I read in Proverbs, the 11th chapter, verse 24, that there is that which withholds more than is meet, or that is which is right and proper. And it says here, you have kept back by fraud their wages. Now, it would be a tremendous insight to go into the political situation, or the financial system rather, of our world today, and see how that the oil companies have reaped tremendous profits, even some of them in excess of 100% on their investment, which is a very, very high percentage, and sometimes 200 and 300%, which certainly would be more than is their just due. And at the same time, they abhor that the laborers would want to get a bigger salary to meet the necessities of life. Now, you see in this situation that they are withholding their wages, and little by little they are getting less and less. And you know that the general wage scale of the working class in America is falling behind the inflation rate, so that the wages today are going down little by little. And we'll see that because these other great concerns are demanding more and more profits, which of course will result in less and less labor salaries paid to those who reap down their fields and do their work. So you see the revelation of this great financial concern is of the greatest truth in our society today. It is exactly as it is. Now, you understand that there is on foot today a world system of banking and a world system of electronic transfer of funds, which they call a cashless society, in which these world banking concerns and these great financial tycoons of the world want to reduce the economic situation of the world to electronic transfer of funds. Now, this is further along than we perceive at this moment. The United States government has committed themselves, and they are already bringing into function that the payment of many of the recipients of Social Security and welfare and other government checks, numbering in excess of 5 million, they are working out a scheme of electronic transfer of funds whereby these payments will be transferred from the Treasury of the United States to the bank in which the recipients do their banking by electronic computers, so that when this is all set up, and it is already beginning to function, that by the pushing of a button, so to speak, in the computer, the government will pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of accounts electronically with such speed that it will stagger the imagination. It will transfer it from the Treasury of the United States to the bank where the recipient does his banking, and with a matter of electricity and the computer, the account of the individual will be run out by computer, and as whenever this is instituted in Washington, in a matter of a split second, it will be on the account of the recipient, no matter where he is in the United States. Now, they're doing that for certain economic reasons. It is stated that the handling of checks of all the banking accounts of the citizens of the United States that do business with banks cost the banks $10 billion to handle these checks every single year. Now, they say that $10 billion is somewhere around 1 or 2% of the gross national product, which is a tremendous sweep of business. Now, imagine $10 billion for handling canceled checks. And this electronic transfer of funds will eliminate the transfer and the handling of these checks. So you can see why the banks would be interested in making this change. It will save them a tremendous piece of money. At the same time, there will be no such thing as forged checks, because there will be no checks. There are many companies, large companies in the United States, that are already paying their employees out of the bank of the company's funds to the banks of the employees by the electronic transfer of funds. This is already being done. Now, it is obvious that this is going to continue until this World Bank will bring this into a situation where that every transaction of economics will be controlled by computers, and it won't make any difference whether the citizen has a bank in Texas or wherever his bank is, and if he's traveling in Hong Kong or Shanghai or in Tokyo or in Europe or South America, wherever he is and wants to purchase any merchandise, before he can pick it up from the counter, it will be reduced and taken off from his bank account by this electronic transfer of funds. Now you can see it will have some definite advantages. Person will not be accountable if they lose their credit card or if they lose their bank book. They won't have a checkbook. They will just have this identification. Now, however they will have this, I don't know, but it will probably be in a very secure manner so that it cannot be stolen or transferred. And no matter where the person goes in the world, if he wants to purchase any merchandise, the moment he approaches the cash register of the particular store, all the person has to do is to put his number in the machine, and the clerk will know immediately if he has sufficient funds to buy the merchandise on the counter. So you see, this would have some advantage, in particular for people who travel. They would see the tremendous advantage of this type of banking system. But all will be forced by economy to use this, and that will be nothing wrong with it. But when the time comes that this great system of revelation is formed, this World Bank with World Church and State, and then they make a decree that certain persons who have certain numbers to do merchandising, that is to say, the saints per se, will be taken out of the computer, and those persons will not be able to merchandise. Now you can see how easily this could be done, and Satan knows this and is developing just such a situation. And God saw that this would be the case, and the prophecies reveal to us explicitly how this will come about and what we are to do in that case. The great merchants have been made rich by this great system. Now, I want to call your attention to a situation in the Bible that is in counter-distinction to this in the book of Genesis. It's in the story of Joseph. It's found in the 45th chapter of Genesis, and it has pertinence to the last days. Although it's in the first book of the Bible, by the spirit of prophecy and the nature of prophecy, we know this is applicable to the last days. In the 25th chapter, 45th chapter of the book of Genesis, which is the Joseph story in Egypt, a situation arose in which, as you remember, God revealed through the dreams of Pharaoh that there would be a great 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Now, these 7 and 7 here, of course, have symbolic meaning, meaning all the prosperity and all of the famine. And he says that the famine years will consume all of the bountiful years. And you remember how Joseph came into position to execute this particular affair. So in Genesis 45, verse 5, it says, "Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves." This is Joseph talking to his brothers after he made known himself to them, "that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve your life." Now when the Pharaoh gave Joseph a name in his position, he called him Zaphnath-Paaneah in the Egyptian language, and being interpreted, it means the Son of God. Pharaoh evidently observed that Joseph had a very definite relation to God, so as to be designated the Son of God. And Sister White says that Joseph was a type of Christ in the land of Egypt. So you see, even the Egyptians gave him the name that indicated this. And he says here to his brothers, "I have been sent here to preserve your lives from the famine that shall come." Well, you remember finally the famine set in, as it says in the record of the 47th chapter, and I just want to call your attention how it reads. 47 verse 13 and onward. It says that finally the people said there was no bread. They had used up all their bread in the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted for reason of the famine. Genesis 47 verse 13, now 14. "And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, for the corn, which they bought, and Joseph brought the money unto Pharaoh." So the famine continued until the people in the land of Canaan and in the land of Egypt and the other lands spent all their money to buy corn and grain for their subsistence, until their money was all gone. Then it says their money came to an end, and Joseph said to them, "Well, bring your cattle." So verse 16 says that they brought their cattle and traded it for money. No doubt he let them have the cattle back to care for them, and they received something to pay for it, but the cattle belonged to Pharaoh. After all their cattle were obtained by the corn, then they said they brought the deeds of their land, the deeds of their property, and they traded that so that all the land was accumulated by Pharaoh. After the king, through Joseph's administration, had gotten all their money, all their deeds, and all their cattle, they said, "You have gotten everything, and we're still in the need of corn." Well, Joseph said, "I haven't gotten everything. We will prorate every person out and give them a certain value. A person 15, 16 years of age would be worth more money as a slave." And so he bought all of their persons until he got all their money, all their deeds, all their cattle, and then he bought their person. Now, this is to reveal that God had revealed to Joseph, as a type of Christ, how that God is providing the food for the entire human race, and that God has purchased the whole human race by redemption, and this shows that God has purchased all through Joseph, through his provision of food, to recognize that God has purchased all their land, all their property, and all their persons through this revelation of Joseph. So they sold everything they had, and Joseph became possessor through Pharaoh of all their property. Now, let me show you the counterpart of this in the book of Revelation. I'm reading now in Revelation, the 18th chapter, and it says in verse 11, "The merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, because nobody buys their merchandise anymore." That's verse 11 of the 18th chapter. Verse 12, "The merchandise of gold and silver," that is, they controlled all the money, "and the precious stones, the pearls, the fine linen, the purple, the silk, and scarlet," and they had all the clothing business. And it says, "And the fine wood, and all manners of vessels of ivory, and all manner of vessels of precious wood, and brass, and iron, and marble." They had the metals, and they had the ceramics, and they had all the vessels. They had the cinnamon, and the odors, and the ointment, the frankincense, the wine, the oil, the flour, and the wheat, the beast, the sheep, the horses, the chariots. They had all of it. They had all the equipment of cattle and land and property. And now the last thing it says in the 13th verse, "And they had the slaves and the souls of men." So here this banking system had gotten all their property, all their money, all their land, and finally even the souls of men. They purchased their souls by the fact that they were not able to buy or sell, save they would worship this great system of the last days and keep the day which they had honored. So you see, it even took their souls. Now God has revealed through Joseph that he will make provision. So we don't have a choice of whether we're going to sell out. We just have a choice in the revelation of the Scriptures as to who we shall sell out to. The situation in the last days will become so economically stringent that these great financial concerns, as this particular verse in the Revelation of these great bankers or merchants, they will control all merchandise, even the souls of men. But God has revealed through Joseph that God has provided the food of the gospel, and it has purchased all the values, even the souls of men, and we must make that relationship to God, because when that time comes, unless our soul and our possessions are in the bank of heaven, we will be found to be in a bad position. In Matthew the 6th chapter, verse 19, "Lay up not for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break in through and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So when we apply and give the treasures of our earth, that there is no valuable, no money, no possession we have, but what we would dedicate it to God's cause, we are placing our treasures in the bank of heaven. And this is where the great payoff of interest and profit will be to us throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity, because the bank and the quality of our products on earth will be taken by this World Bank. Before they get them, we should dedicate them to God's cause. And Sister White says, if we're willing, the Lord will reveal to us when that time comes for each individual to lay up our treasure in heaven.